Hello and welcome to this discussion on mental health. My name's Alan Fairclough. I work for Learning Well, supporting people around Crewe and Winsford. And looking forward to sharing with you today this discussion around men's mental health. So this discussion today is called Open Up versus Man Up. It's a discussion around issues specific to males and male mental health. We're doing this because November is Men's Mental Health Month, and we've got International Men's Day coming up as well. So my background is I was a serving police officer for 30 years and worked in lots of operational environments. And I also led some police forces response to supporting colleagues around diffusing and critical incident debriefing. Having left the police, I worked for a charity and we set up a peer support program for officers going through ill health retirement. So some peer support there for officers with physical and mental challenges. Worked with lots of amazing people there around PTSD. And the charity Police Care UK, they also worked and came up with some fantastic ways to help support officers who dealt with traumatic incidents and process those incidents before they filed them away long term to better help and support their mental health. And I also worked as a search practitioner, a volunteer search practitioner for Cheshire Search and Rescue, and have helped Cheshire Search and Rescue around Diffuse as well. So I'm not putting myself here as an expert by any stretch of the imagination around mental health, just sharing some of my experiences and sharing a bit about me and me learning to understand myself and my mental health, and just simply, encouraging and hoping you can think what's the best way to support your mental health as a unique man on the planet.
Keep it in. Know your problem, keep it all in. That's right. The conversation we had last night. All I want to be good without you in the heart. I kept it all in.
So did you recognise that song there? The song was called Keep It All In by the Beautiful South, a song from the early 90s. And that song's all about a male and a female in a relationship having an argument, really, and the female really trying to encourage the man to open up about his feelings, but the man being unable to do that. And that stereotypically is perhaps what lots of people think about the male psyche when it comes to mental health. So we're going to be exploring some of those myths today. We're going to consider some identified male mental health risks. We're going to start identifying some good practice for some male solutions. Some of these, I'm sure, will really appeal to you. So as well as looking at what some good practice looks like, again, encouraging you to get to know yourself, and then thinking about those two issues, knowing yourself and what offers are out there, is then starting to think about, well, how do I actually find that mental health support that I actually need? Now, there is a trigger warning with this presentation. A few times during this presentation, we will be discussing suicide. So just a trigger warning for people who might want to avoid it for those reasons. So let's start first with open up then, and back to the song, you know your problem, you keep it all in. So there is this sort of view that men do keep it all in. So what are society saying? Are they saying that, well, it's men's problems then? If men want to keep those mental health problems inside themselves, they're to blame for their own problems. Is that what we're saying? Or is society saying, well, actually, just men can't communicate? Men haven't got the language or the verbal ability to actually communicate their feelings, that there's some sort of deficiency there in some males in their language. Well, this is some of the questions to think about here. This is actually a worldwide phenomenon. It's not just an issue with men in Cheshire or men in the UK. There's evidence around the whole world that this communication and men keeping stuff in is a worldwide phenomenon. And if it was something that isn't particularly linked to being a male, it's about nurture rather than nature. Well, we know that in the UK, lots of male children, boys, spend time in childcare, which is predominantly with females, and female teachers is the majority as well. So if it is a skill that can be learned, why aren't our boys learning that skill in the early stages of their life? So perhaps it is a characteristic. Perhaps it is a characteristic in men that they are unable to open up and keep it in. But well, if that's the case, if it is a characteristic, would we criticise that? Under the Equality Act, would we criticise a characteristic that somebody is unable to change? So thinking about the issues around opening up and the pressures that might start to put on some men, let's think about this man up type expectations around being a man. And we've got these ancient rules of masculinity, as some researchers call them, that certainly influence me, and certainly I'm sure have influenced men around the world as well. The first of these rules is that men should be fighters, men should be winners. And to illustrate this, I've had a look at some of the propaganda posters from the UK in the First and Second World War and beyond. And you can see that kind of poster there. Look, join the new regular army, a real man's life, encouraging men to be fighters. And another poster there that women of Britain say go. So openly the governments and communities encouraging men to go and sign up and sacrifice themselves in the Great War. And also, to reinforce that, there's also evidence that some women would actually go out and pin white feathers to men who didn't sign up. And that poster there, I'm sure a lot of you have seen that poster as well of a man sitting in a chair. Daddy, what did you do in the Great War? This sort of shaming type of approach to get men to become fighters and winners and sign up. The second rule of masculinity is men should be providers, men should be protectors, that providing for their families, for their nation. And again, going back to the propaganda posters that just reinforce this, there's a poster there of a male soldier, and he's sort of talking down there to a male child, a boy, leave Hitler to me, sonny, you ought to be out of London. And as a society and a nation, we did that. We evacuated children away from dangerous parts to safer parts. And another good illustration of this sort of mindset, how it's sort of pushed upon us, is thinking about the Titanic and ship sinking. There's lots of first-hand evidence of the captain and the crew demanding that women and children evacuate the Titanic first. Lots of first-hand accounts from women who had to leave their husbands and boyfriends behind and never saw them again, because women and children got in the lifeboats, and the highest percentage of casualties were males, because simply there wasn't enough lifeboats. So I talk about these this propaganda and the Titanic because this is my grandparents. My grandparents were alive around this time of human history, so this would have absolutely impacted on their beliefs and the values they pushed onto my parents. And I remember, my parents and my older siblings using this language around me. And it's only for me, really, in the last sort of 10, 15, 20 years that some of these ancient rules have started to unfreeze and change, the mental pressure that is put on some men. The third rule of masculinity is this: retain mastery, retain self-control, this calmness under pressure and danger. And again, another recruitment poster there, a propaganda poster there from the war: be like dad, keep mum, careless talk costs lives. So this recognition that actually men don't talk. as much as women. And actually highlighting that as a strength. That's what we want people to do around not letting the enemy know secrets. So these ancient rules of masculinity, you'll have if you think about your own life and influences and your values and your role models, this would have impacted you perhaps greater or lesser extent than it has myself. But for me, it certainly does start to set these societal expectations of men and mental health. Now, linked to that is risk taking. There is evidence to show that it's an evolutionary trait that men are more risk taking than women. I mean, the classic Darwin Awards, that fantastic photograph there of taking the photograph inside an alligator's mouth. And the next image there of a man at a fun fair holding onto a sort of electric chair simulator. But yeah, this risk taking, well, I'm sure it's a multi-billion-pound business around adrenaline sports and white adrenaline sports and roller coasters. So risk taking, the impact that has on mental health. And we're seeing, a rise in toxic masculinity, negative role models around, never becoming a victim, promoting violence, being a man. This type of toxic masculinity, that will be having an impact negatively on some men's mental health as well. So what is the sort of impact of these rules and these expectations? Well, there is a sort of a cultural acceptance of some of this impact. It's accepted that males don't live long as females. Well, why should we accept that? Why is that fair to accept that males don't live as long as females? And let's look at some of the reasons behind this. Well, 97% of recorded workplace deaths are male, because males tend to work the riskier, more dangerous type roles, and therefore they pay a price for that. Thinking about suicide, 75% of people who took their own life were male, and last year's numbers were the highest ever numbers since 1999. 82% of rough sleepers are male. Most people who go missing from home and searched for by police and search and rescue organisations are male. So there's lots of impact here caused by these man-up type pressures that, that's what I would contend. What am I saying then? Open up versus man up. What am I saying is good practice? Well, I'm not saying we need to change the male gender. There's lots of good and positive about the way that men operate within their gender. So surely there must be some solutions to meet and promote those gendered needs. And there's lots of really good practice out there in the solutions that are on offer to you to help you with your mental health. So in a quiet room with another person and be asked to explore some difficult mental health issues. Speaking as myself, who's undergone some counselling, I found this really difficult to actually get some good value out of those sessions because the environment didn't work for me. With males, good practice suggests if you encourage a male to tell their story, not ask them about their feelings, that will help their mental health better. Reflecting on my time working in diffuse and debriefs, quite often if we had a male who was struggling, we would ask a question about what were you thinking, what did you do next? We asked those types of questions, but the answer that came to us was quite often feeling and emotion based. So building that framework where encouraging men to talk, and naturally that will come out. Banter helps men make connections. It's part of the male psyche, part of that bonding, and it shouldn't be viewed as avoidance or defensive behavior. So the photograph I've just dropped in down there is me in the center and two of my good friends, Chris Paul. We've known each other since we started our careers, over 30 years ago. We had children around the same time. We've been each other's best man, that type of thing. And here's a photograph of us from literally a few weeks ago with our sort of bi-yearly get-togethers, walking and hiking. So a bit more grey and a bit more chubby. But from a banter point of view, the conversations we have today, we were still taking the mickey out of each other of things we did 30 years ago. We're still highly competitive between each other over things that don't really matter. But to us, that's just helped us bond and stay together, and keep those friendships and support across each other going. So healthy banter is a good thing for men. Activities help men promote conversations as well. So, the classic quote of, if you get a group of men in a room together and ask them to talk about feelings, then they'll just look down at their feet and nothing will be said. But if you throw a broken lawnmower into that room, then suddenly there's that shared activity. Men will start interacting, sharing their stories, and naturally start sharing feelings to support each other. So that's a really interesting solution. And I think for me, that also eases those non-verbal communications. They're quite intense. Sitting face to face can be quite intense, eye contact, verbally and non-verbally. But having an activity gives those natural breaks in eye contact, conversations, ability to move around the room. That can really help some men as well. And some charities have really grabbed and run with this, haven't they? Which we'll look at in a second. And the other thing as well is to use healthy male culture, use healthy male camaraderie, use healthy male teams. There's lots of really good examples out there in terms of strong teams around football, rugby, for example, around armed services, businesses. And for me, when I think about male culture, there's a photograph there of Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band, a photograph I took at a gig a few months ago now. But for me, that type of role model, the way he lives his life, the way he supports his family's political views, there's lots of positive male culture that we can build these solutions and support around. And male camaraderie, it doesn't have to be like that on an international scale or a regional scale. It can just be within a group of friends or a family. And that photograph that I've just dropped in there, that's me on the right and a group of the males involved in my daughter's wedding a few years ago. And we've known each other as a group of friends for a few years before the wedding took place. And we had this healthy banter, camaraderie relationship. And what we decided is the winner of the fantasy football league for that year, they got to choose which football team socks we had to wear for the wedding. So that's why you can see us all standing there wearing Manchester United socks. Some of us liked it, some of us didn't like it. But this positive, healthy banter type culture, it helps to keep men together. And by bringing men together, that's where that mental health support and peer support takes place. So having thought a bit about the solutions that could be out there, now I want you just to spend some time to think about yourself. What's the best fit for you? Get to know yourself. Now, the first thing around knowing yourself is, what are your life rules? What rules, informal or formal rules, do you have that you live your life by? Now, for me, a couple are that I'm ruthless with time and gracious with people. That's a really important thing to me. Always try and get the best out of every day, but that's not to sacrifice the way that I actually treat communities, people, friends, and family. And the second rule for me is work hard, play hard. When I've got that time away from work, I really try to maximize what I do and get the best out of my day. So for you, what are those life rules that you have? I think the second thing about knowing yourself as well is understand what gives you energy and what takes that energy away. And with the lives that we lead nowadays, some of the activities, some of the people, some of the work that we do, some of that will give us energy and will charge our batteries, but some of it will take it away. And we have to do both. in our lives. So it's understanding where that give and take has to be. So I'm going to share a bit of myself here and just again encourage you to think a bit about what these energy givers and takers look like in your life. So for me time, us time, and family time are equally important. I know that for my mental health, I need time on my own. So sometimes that's walking on my own, sometimes it's zoning out to watch a football match on my own, but I need me time. But on top of that, I also need us time. So me and my wife, me and my children, me and my wife and my children together as family time, all those different combinations for me both give me energy, and some of them also take energy as well. So it's recognizing that push and pull that we have in our lives. Food is really important to all of us around mental health. So food, hydration, sleep, and exercise, four classic things that we have to be looking at in terms of our mental health. But what does that look like for you? So food, for example, to me is very important. To you, it might not be important, that, and we just need to know ourselves. To me, having the family round, all the kids and the grandkids, and having 10, 15 people over for a family lunch or Christmas, that really energizes me, and I love doing that. But I know to some people that would be quite scary and would take energy away. Health and menopause and well-being, I've dropped those in there as well, and again next to the photograph there of me with my oldest son, because I'm 30 years or so older than my son. So for me, issues around my health at my stage of life, the menopause, that reduction in adrenaline being produced, for example, it's very different to me compared to my son. So that little bit of understanding of where we are in our age and life, and any health conditions is really important as well. Having a purpose in life is absolutely fundamental. So what is your purpose in life? Purpose could be supporting family, it could be work, it could be based around volunteering, it could be based around a hobby, but having a purpose is really important. And for me, I'm a very positive person. I'm a spontaneous praiser. I like being around positive people. If I'm around people who are negative, doom and gloom, criticizing everything that's happening in their life and family, I just have to move away from those people. But again, I understand that some people are energized because they are spontaneous criticizers. Again, which type of person are you? And for me, I get lots of value and energy from the little things in life. So, for example, in the garden, I thought I'd killed a plant. Actually, I haven't. It's still growing nice and healthy. I get a lot from that. I love Speedway. I love watching Speedway, and get a lot of pleasure from being there, the sound, the noise of Speedway. So what are the things that give you that pleasure? And then relationships are really important around mental health as well. Positive relationships and positive mental health. And all of us have challenges in our relationships at some time, don't we? And so community and chums, for me, that's an important thing to think about as well. So community, my relationship with people over the garden fence, at the local cafe, with the charities and groups of friends I volunteer in. And chums as well. Over the years, I've got lots of chums that I've met through work and social activities. From that, I've got a group of friends that I perhaps would meet and have a cup of coffee with. But out of that has dropped this hardcore of about half a dozen people who I regularly go on holiday with, stay in contact with, and they know as much about me, maybe more about me than I know about myself. So again, all these different types of relationships that we have all help towards our mental health. And the photograph I've just dropped in there, they're me in various different outfits, because I worked as an entertainment and activities coordinator at a care home, which is something that's really outside my comfort zone. But I felt I needed to give that a go to help with my mental health. And this was part of leaving the police and readjusting back to not working full time. And so doing things that scared me, like lots of pantomimes and activities, for example, that was the right thing for me to do for a couple of years. And final thing about knowing yourself, for me, these words are very important to me. I like consistency. I like depth. What I mean by that is that consistency and depth is, I've been a fan of science fiction since a young boy. I like art and comic art. I've got some comics under the bed that I've had for nearly 50 years, and they're really precious to me, and every a couple of times every year I get them out and read them. But to some people, that they might just see that as clutter and living in the past, and actually that type of thing doesn't work for them, and they want to go shopping, they want the latest iPhone, they want to wear the latest clothes. So what works for you? What works for you? Are you around consistency and depth? Or are you about new? Do you have a lot of varied interests and like trying things new? Or like me, do you have just a few that you like doing and keep doing over the years? So I encourage you to get to know yourself. I should add a piece on here which might be used or not in the final version. So around getting to know yourself, there are online questionnaires you can fill in, type indicators like Myers-Briggs, for example. There's different ways that you can get to know yourself and understand your motivators and demotivators, your energy givers and your energy takers. Okay, so having known ourselves, now we're going to think about, well, what is the best fit support for me? I now know myself, and I've had to think about, in broad terms, what kind of solutions are out there for men. Let's start thinking about choosing the right support network for you. Well, you can stay local if local works for you, or you could look for some support at a regional level. You could even look at some support at national level as well. And with us being in Men's Mental Health Month, there's lots of initiatives and support out there that you can jump on the back of if you like, and get some help for yourself. Now, searching just locally on Cheshire East, we're here at Learning Well, where we're based. 408 results there for mental health. Just jumping on a search engine there and having a look nationally, there's lots of support charities and networks out there aimed at men. So decide, you go local, you go regional, or do you fancy national? And then think about the type of help that you want. Do you prefer help? Would you much rather sit and listen for you? Or are you quite happy to pick up the telephone and talk to somebody on a telephone? Or perhaps one step on from that, do you need that support in person, face to face, in the same room, over a brew? Again, which one of those works best for you? And again, just doing some local searching, there are helplines available locally, regionally, and nationally that you can find very quickly. Again, think about getting this support. Do you want to get this support anonymously, like Alcoholics Anonymous, for example? There's lots of benefits of getting support in that anonymous environment. But you might actually feel that what works better for you is in where you do identify yourself and you go along and you're happy for people to know your identity. And again, one step further from that, you might feel that you need some help and support from people who have that similar background to you. So support from peers can be very powerful. So you might think that peer support is the best for you. And again, we talked about these activity-based support networks. Activity-based may work better for you rather than a group environment. And if you are going to go for that activity-based support, you could combine that with learning some new skills. There's lots of positives about learning new skills and mental health. Or you could base it on an old skill, a familiar skill, a skill that perhaps you did a few years ago and want to get back into. So there's lots of activity-based support that you could look for. And for me, the sort of one of the best examples of that across the UK is Men in Sheds. So we do have active shedders here in Crewe and in Winsford, but they're online, very easy to find, and lots of sheds available to you. And again, the support we look for, we could base it around our employment. So for me, leaving the police and then working for police care, there was a real natural fit there for me in terms of my mental health, my volunteers, and the service users. I could see real benefits in that. You could seek that type of team, such as a football team, a sports team, or it could be based around a team in employment, like Army, for example, or another fantastic charity here called Mates in Mind. And Mates in Mind do some really good work about supporting in the construction industry and in the logistics industry, for example. So there's lots of charities out there based around employment, hobby, and team. So as I said at the start of this presentation, I'm not an expert. I'm just sharing some views. I'm certainly not clinical, qualified in anything I'm saying. But all the issues we've talked about in this presentation, all of them underpin that NHS model around supporting mental health, encouraging connection, encouraging you to be active, about taking notice in your day-to-day life. Keep learning those new skills and giving back and giving to others. Thanks very much for listening today. My name's Alan Fairclough. I work for Learning Well, based here in Cheshire East. If you want to find out more about our services, please go to thelearning-well.com.